Well, what he didn't explain or give an answer to was the question I asked him 12 months ago. Would he explain to the House the differences between the Al-Qaeda we're supporting in some countries and the Al-Qaeda we're considering a threat to life as we know it in other places? We are supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria. We've given them a very substantial sum of British taxpayers' money, even more in the way of military aid and logistics and training and the support of special forces. But when those very same Al-Qaeda cross the border into Iraq, well, it's the end of life as we know it, and we must bomb them. This simply, as a matter of simple logic, cannot be squared.
So what do you make of Mr. Cameron's raising of worries that Britain needs to be prepared for ISIS insurgents waging a war in favour of an Islamic caliphate back here in Britain eventually?
I told you so. More importantly, I told him so. I told him that these people that you're encouraging in Syria will one day stalk the streets of our own country. That's why I described Britain's policy in Syria as close to insanity. I told William Hague, you've been wrong many times before. In fact, you've been wrong most of your life, but you've never been insane before. This policy of encouraging jihadism in Syria is close to literal insanity.
What do you think Mr. Cameron and Mr. Hague should be doing, if anything, about Iraq?
We cannot intervene in the conflict in Iraq, even though that conflict may now lead to the physical separation of the country. This ISIS formation cannot possibly conquer Baghdad, still less conquer the south of the country. So, de facto, Iraq no longer exists. It's at least three countries. It is the Kurdish entity, the ISIS-controlled Sunni heartlands, and the Shiite-controlled capital and south. And that will be pregnant with many terrifying problems for now and for many decades to come.
But, I mean, some people can see the longer-term prospect of Britain recanting in some areas in its foreign policy, of now cozying up potentially to Iran, and some have even suggested perhaps reawakening their relationship with Bashar al-Assad because he might be a bulwark against ISIS.
Well, they ought to relate to the government in Syria in an entirely different way to the one they are. They ought to be supporting the Syrian government's mortal struggle against these Al-Qaeda elements. They must dispose of a trick they learned in the 1980s in Afghanistan, which has led to so much trouble. You see, your enemy's enemy isn't always your friend. Sometimes your enemy's enemy is worse than your enemy. And sometimes it's right to collaborate with your enemy against your enemy's enemy.